How much longer, Tech? Hunter asked through their short-range comms, crouching on the upper end of the lowered ramp, body half obscured in the shadow of the ship. Behind him, laid down flat across the floor of the Imperial vessel so that he was even further back than Hunter was, lay Crosshair, rifle braced and ready. Wrecker was further inside the ship, their reserve, or so Hunter had said, though it was mostly to keep the hulking clone out of sight. Even further behind him, deep inside the Imperial gunship, were the twin forms of Tech and Quo, both bent and working frenziedly over the console of the ship's cockpit. I'm sorry, Sergeant. These security protocols are far denser than I had imagined they would be. I'm going to need more time if we want to take off using this craft, Tech said in response. Hunter scowled. They had already been here for far longer than he wanted to be, and his skin was starting to itch. He could feel something, but unlike most times, he was unsure what. But he had the sense that the entire enormous vessel was accelerating towards the heart of a star, or some other terminal destination. Try as he might, the mutant clone simply could not shake the feeling, helmet panning from side to side, looking for the first signs of the encroaching danger. Damn it, Tech. Can't your new best friend help you do this faster? Crosshair snapped. He is doing exactly that, but you have to remember, until just recently, Vo was a prisoner of this ship and its facilities. As such, he was obviously not privileged with the access codes for... Tech began to explain before being cut off by Hunter. Wait, something is happening, said the sergeant, and, sure enough, a second later, doors and hatches began to open across the wide, tall space of the hangar bay, streams of armored soldiers pouring out of the entrances, all armed and faceless in fully encompassing spacesuits. Frack, Crosshair breathed over the comms. Tech, did you trip something? Hunter asked, voice frantic as he inched up the ramp a couple of steps. There was a pause, more and more men filling the hangar, each rushing, weapons out and ready. They were obviously ready to fight, their frantic yet organized mobilization suggesting that they were rushing to neutralize a threat, likely their escape. No, Sergeant. I don't think either of us have been noticed by anything within the system. This ship is using a closed system anyway, and we severed the exterior connections before beginning, so they should, at best, see a non-communicative transponder error, and nothing more, was Tech's response after a few moments. Well, I think your transponder stunt rung way more bells than you realized. We've been made, and they've sent an entire army to lock us down, Crosshair hissed, angling his rifle up towards the mob of soldiers looking for his first target. I say bring him on, said Wrecker, clapping his fist against his palm. Wait. Something's not right, Hunter said, noticing that the mass of soldiers were not actually converging directly on them, but rather near them. Something is about to be even less right with the commander's head, said Crosshair, sighting down the ornately plumed and armored head of the captain-at-arms of these many warriors. Even in their spacesuits, the leader was blatantly obvious, 3 heads taller than the men around him, with armor that was clearly mechanized, flanked by 4 similar soldiers who obviously served as his guards or sub-commanders. While Crosshair's instincts drew his targeting reticle onto their leader's head, his experience lowered his aim down to the man's waist, locating 3 differently shaped grenades to target. He was picking out which one he figured would be the best to detonate when Hunter's hand grabbed the barrel of his blaster and pulled it down. I said wait, the sergeant ordered. Look at them. They're not here for us. He asserted a moment later, eyes observing their movements carefully as the clones remained hidden within the long gunship. Crosshair soon saw, despite his frustration, that Hunter was correct. The Imperials did not try to encircle them, nor did they begin checking the ships around them, or any ships for that matter. Instead, they went toward a clearing to the right of their ship, and he began to lose sight of them then. Quietly getting up, he and Wrecker inched down the ramp, as did Hunter, all 3 of them watching as the growing Imperial army formed a semicircle around the empty landing platform, their guns out and aimed as though some craft were already sitting there. "Oh frag! Seal up! Everyone seal up! I think they're going to open the..." Hunter began to say before a deep rumble proved him correct. The gargantuanly massive metal doors which led out into the void of space began to creak and then scream as the air inside the hangar was violently sucked out into the void. Luckily for Clone Force 99, they had already been wearing their helmets to make themselves look less noticeable, and their suit integrity was easily secured. Quo shrugged his shoulders and pulled his red hood more securely around his head, holding it in place as the air rushed out. The clones braced and grabbed onto the ship to keep from being dislodged, the ships themselves and most other things in the hangar space being magnetically locked or otherwise secured for this very reason. The many assembled soldiers also braced themselves, never lowering their guns as their mag boots activated and kept them all adhered to the ground. A single, unaccounted for maintenance servitor was flung up towards the enormous doors, thrown by the departing air, but not hard enough to actually exit the ship, the artificial gravity pulling the confused, flailing machine man back down to smash messily against the deck. Shortly after that, a new vessel of similar size to the one they were attempting to steal floated in on blazing engines. Right away, Hunter could tell that this thing was very different from all the other pieces of Imperial equipment they had seen thus far. It was sleek, smooth, and shimmering in gold. Its engines were mounted on engine pods, which were colored bright red, and in spite of the combustion-based methods of flight it employed, it flew with a dainty grace that seemed completely at odds with that shown by other Imperial vessels. The golden gunship landed right on the empty landing pad, the massive hangar doors screaming again as they began to close, and air was slowly pumped back into the huge room. The soldiers all around the ship stepped and shuffled back, and a tremendous sense of unease pervaded the air, and Hunter knew why. He had known from the moment that sun-colored predator had drifted into the larger ship. This, not the army around it, was the danger Hunter had felt approaching through his keen mutant senses. Something on board that new gunship was making him feel the uneasy sting of fear. Not rational fear, or even nervous fear. No, this was something far more primal, like the sense the hawk got when it was suddenly in the shadow of a much larger bird. The being yet unseen, but the weight of its nature oppressing him through sheer proximity. "Looks like the boss just showed up," said Wrecker. "Shh! Be quiet. I want total calm silence until this is over," the sergeant snapped. But Hunter... Tech began to say, but he was not allowed to finish his statement. "That's an order. No further comms use starting now," Hunter commanded, his tone brooking no further debate. The comms went silent, which was good since it allowed Hunter to hear what was going on as the doors to the new gunship hissed and slid open. A new figure walking out into the recently oxygenated air. A woman strode out, dressed in armor that was both regal and rugged. She wore a tall hat, a large golden eye cresting the center. A storm of black dreadlocks spilled out from beneath that hat, some reaching as far as her knees, and she was followed by 3 other women who stood on one side of her or the other. They were not greeted warmly, every weapon in the mob before them tracking the 4 as they walked towards the leader of the disproportionately large force, who had brought himself to the front of the army in order to meet them. Hunter listened closely.
"Madame Udama, we warned you that you did not have clearance to land. This entire ship is under quarantine due to issues with our warp engines. It is severely unsafe for you to be here even now. I must insist you leave immediately,"
the man said through the speakers on his glass-faced helmet. The woman did not respond to him right away, looking to her left and then to her right, head panning slowly. Her expression, one of skeptical doubt, and her demeanor conveying the depth of just how unimpressed she appeared to be with the display set up before her. Today has been a long day, Captain, so I will be direct and I will be brief. I am not Madame Udama to you. To you, I am Inquisitor Udama. Forget that at your own peril. Furthermore, I am fully aware at this point in time as to the purpose of this ship and its hidden facilities. I am also aware of the fact that this has been done and conducted under the authority of Inquisitor Tarweiler. I know he has ordered you and your men to ensure no one, not even another member of the Inquisition, enters the hidden prison you have on this ship, or any of its other, more obscure locations. Because you are, as far as I can determine, merely doing your duty to the best of your ability, I will give you this one chance, just one, to understand that Inquisitor Tarweiler has overstepped his bounds and authority as an Inquisitor, that he is currently under investigation for heresy and sedition against the right of Imperial authority, and has been for months. He is dragging you all down with his crimes, but right now, you have a chance to liberate yourselves from his sin and be absolved. Stand aside, said the woman. Her voice was the very definition of command itself, and she stood, a defiant spike against the sea of guns around her. The man before her took a deep breath, audible through his helmet speakers, and then began to respond.
I respect that you are an Inquisitor, and that in your view, you are also pursuing your duties the only way you know how. So allow me to be even briefer and more direct. Inquisitor Udama, we will not stand aside, and we will not allow you to step even a single foot further into this ship. I will not confirm or deny any of your accusations, and I do not recognize your authority here at this time,
he said, and the sound of loaded weapons and raised rifles shuffling in hands became a muffled storm around them as the captain made clear their stance.
What I will do, however, is count to 10. I will allow you that much time to turn around, get back in your ship, and leave. Bother me with no more threats. There is nothing you can say that will shake my men from their duty, nor me from mine,
he finished, and she sighed in response, raising her hand in the same moment. There is no need to count. I will leave. I have no desire to challenge an army for my investigation, so I will do as you ask, she said with a sneer. The man bowed lightly.
I appreciate that, Madame Inquisitor,
said the captain. However, she added, making him stiffen, you should know that I have brought certain companions. They have their own reasons for coming here, their own mission to pursue, and I fear I will not be able to dissuade them from it, or keep them on the ship. Inquisitor Udama warned the man.
Then I will be forced to give them the same choice. Leave or die. There is no other option here,
the armored man said sternly, his hand falling down to the grip of his sheathed sword. The Inquisitor shrugged in response, and gestured back towards the ship with her chin, her people turning and beginning to head back in without her. She lingered there for a time, staring the man down, before turning around herself and walking back up towards the ship. I fear you may receive the same ultimatum in return, Captain, if you receive any response at all, she said, waving her hand over her shoulder as she disappeared back into her ship. Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair watched on silently from the shadow over the ramp that led into their gunship. Well, that's weird. What do you think all that's about? Wrecker asked, speaking through his helmet and not his comm. Some kind of power struggle, Crosshair whispered. Hunter nodded. It seems to be just that. Hopefully it won't. He began to say, but trailed off as another sound entered his senses. A single set of footsteps. "Hunter? What's wrong?" Crosshair asked, but his voice sounded like it was a million miles away. All Hunter could hear, all he could focus on, was the languid clank, clank, clank of hard footsteps coming from the open hatch that led into the golden gunship. Something was coming. No, not just something. The thing. The thing that had been setting his senses off. The thing that had been making him feel so uneasy. Even as it approached from space. Clank, clank, clank. It came closer and brought with it the full sense of what Hunter had been blinded to before. The shadow of death itself was cold over them all, but only Hunter could feel it. "Hey, something else is coming out of the..." Wrecker began to say. "Shh, be quiet! Everyone be quiet! Back into the ship!" Hunter hissed to both Wrecker and Crosshair. What do you..." Crosshair began to say. "Be quiet, Crosshair! We're in danger, serious danger. I need you both to get out of sight as soon as possible. Both of you get in the ship. Crosshair, get the tech and Crow, and tell them to stop whatever they're doing. Tell them to stop moving entirely. Don't work, don't twitch, don't even think too loudly. Got it?" Hunter snapped. "Hunter, what are you..." Crosshair began again, but could not finish as Hunter spun to face him, grabbing the clone by the shoulder and squeezing. "Do you copy that?" he asked again. Crosshair only paused for a moment before nodding. "Copy, Sergeant," he said, turning and silently creeping back into the gunship and heading for the cockpit. "Oh, but Hunter, I want to see what happens," Wrecker complained. "No, you don't. Now get in there, Wrecker. Don't make me tell you again," the sergeant urged, almost pushing the big man back up the ramp as he groaned in disappointment, and was then ushered to one of the large seats near the back end of the craft, Hunter reminding him to stay silent. Hunter then crept back, intending to shut the hatch, but thinking better of it when he noticed how quiet everything had grown. Instead, he laid down onto the floor, becoming still but remaining near the door mechanism, and listened. For a time, the only sound there was to hear was the dread silence that was filling the air and the clank, clank, clank of the footsteps. Then they stopped.
"I cannot allow,"
Hunter heard, the voice clearly belonging to the captain from before, and yet sounding almost entirely different now. Gone was any sense of confidence from the words, any semblance of strength. The man spoke as though he were in the presence of a monster, and soon the monster spoke back with a single word.
"Move."
Another pause then.
I am sorry, my lord. I cannot,"
was the shaky, broken response that began to answer the deep voice which had spoken. But the captain's faltering words were cut off by a sudden, loud noise. The concussive roar of a sonic boom, Hunter was sure of it, though he knew not what could have caused it or what weapon would have made such a noise. Immediately following that loud interjection came the unmistakable chaotic chorus of frenzied battle. Men screamed, voices muffled by their helmets, their roaring weapons not so. Gunfire, lasfire, and even more sounds from far more exotic guns began filling the recently replenished air. And among that cacophony, Hunter could make out the sound of more sonic booms. Could easily hear the scream of air breaking against speed growing louder and louder. Or was it just that the sounds coming from the rest of the army were growing more and more silent with each billowing blast of air? Hunter listened as war cries became death screams, as voices raised in combat frenzy rotted to the desperate shrills of the fearful and the doomed. And then, all too abruptly, silence. Dead silence. Hunter swallowed and checked his heads-up display, looking at the time and feeling a chill thrill of disbelief scream its way down his nerves. It sounded like the battle was over, but it had only been a minute and a half. The mutant clone tried to control his breathing, counting out his breaths like a recruit, and then listening again. At first, he thought that everything had fallen into total quiet once more. But not even then, not even for a moment did he believe they were safe. He could still feel it, that sense of danger. And then, soon, he could hear it as well, as the sound of his own heart pounding in his ears subsided. Clank, squish, clank. It was walking again. Whatever it was, the danger, the monster. He wanted to believe that it was just his intense nerves, but after a couple of moments, he felt a panicked heat growing in the back of his throat, as the clone realized for certain that the footsteps were drawing closer. Hunter lay on the ground, but he could still reach the button which would seal the ramp with his rifle. Surely that would buy them some time, right? He gripped his gun like a vice, chilled sweat sliding down across his entire body and into his rapidly blinking eyes. Squish, clank, clank. It was coming closer, stepping on and through the bodies which lay in the way. It was coming here, directly here. Hunter suddenly became aware of his clenched teeth grinding together. What was it? What could make him feel this way? Clank, clank. Pause. It was here. Hunter froze completely, holding his breath, eyes staring straight down at the floor of the hangar down the ramp. His vision trembled, looking frantically. It was here. He heard it, but somehow he could not see it. Was it really possible that it could be standing just outside of his sight range? Swallowing down hard, he moved as silently as he could, edging to his left just a little and tilting his head. There it was, the back end of his booted heel. It glistened with gore, teeny golden flecks shining through the thinnest streams of blood. He barely had time to glance at it before it lifted up and away from sight. Clank, clank, clank. It was walking away. Hunter listened, both hearing and feeling it grow more and more distant, until finally it reached one of the doors the many soldiers had poured in through. The gates hissed open, and the being stepped through and was gone, traveling deeper and deeper into the ship as it sought its own goal. Even then, Hunter did not allow anyone to budge for almost 10 minutes afterwards. Something he was glad for, as the Inquisitor and her agents soon re-emerged, themselves traversing the hangar before departing through one of the doors, though not the same door. After waiting some more, Hunter signaled to Wrecker to get the others, and together they all cautiously crept down the ramp and into the scene beyond. "Oh dear," said Quo, providing what was, by far, the mildest response. "Holy frag," Crosshair said, his arms hanging limply at his sides, fingers only numbly clutching his rifle. "Whoa, this is actually kind of scary, Hunter. I don't think I want to be on this ship anymore," Wrecker complained, his shoulders scrunching as he hunched down and behind the others somewhat. What spectacular carnage! From the amount of bodies present, and the time elapsed during the conflict, I estimate the attacking force must have been able to kill 63 men per second, at least, Tex said, marveling at the sight, hiding any horror behind analytical appreciation as he tapped rapidly against his datapad. All around them, laying mostly where they stood in their ranks, were the butchered corpses of over 5,000 Imperial warriors. They had been smashed, blown open, and sliced to pieces. The raw brutality of the short conflict looking more like the aftermath of a massive disaster in place of the remains left from a battle. "How many of them do you guys think it took to do all this?" Wrecker asked after a moment, his nerve working its way back. "Oh, just one probably," Tech said in quick answer. "Just one? No fragging way." Hunter almost choked out. "No, he's right, Hunter," said Crosshair, gesturing towards the dead. "Look at how they died. The way their bodies fell. The direction they were facing. It's an obvious pattern. They were all tracking a target. One target, which was moving up and down them like a fragging Yoop grain harvester," the sniper pointed out. Tech nodded, coming to stand next to him. "Oh yes, that, and notice the lack of bodies from the other side. The only dead here belong to those opposing the occupants of the Golden Gunship. Not one looks otherwise. On top of that, most of the weapons used to kill these men were CQC specialized, and as Crosshair pointed out, the positions of their dead are very telling. In this case, they tell me that they did not die fighting a line of different melee warriors. Just one, or at best, a small cluster who remained very near to each other," the brainy clone explained. Hunter shook his head and Wrecker gawked. Things just got a sight more complicated. "Okay, listen up, Hunter began to say, but the sound of doors squealing open had him biting off his sentence as he and the others rushed back up the ramp to hide. More soldiers began to enter the hangar, though not nearly as many as before. They wore red and seemed far more cybernized than the men who had come previously, moving in a coordinated set of ranks led by 4 men. One was a mass of writhing metal tentacles, his goggled face barely visible past the wriggling metallic form which wreathed him. Another was a large, rather round man with an elaborate control harness wrapped around his waist and back. The third was a vaguely feminine example, stamping forward on 3 mechanical legs, her body otherwise held rigid and upright. The last was the most notable, for while they all wore red robes, and all were highly altered and augmented, he was separated by wearing his robe down around his waist, leaving his upper body bare, revealing a surprising lack of obvious mechanical implants. However, what was displayed revealed that he was just as altered, if differently so. His blue skin and glittering electus were most obvious, flexing and stretching over hard, trained muscles. A blindfold covered his eyes, but he seemed to have no issue seeing as he made his way into the hangar and began to indicate towards the few parked gunships near their own, clearly indicating to take them for themselves. "What do we do now, Sergeant?" Crosshair hissed, but before Hunter could answer, Quo began to move, casually standing up and walking down the ramp, plainly revealing himself. "Oh, Velen, there you are! It's so good to see you!" Quo called, waving his hand and drawing the attention of the other priests. "What is he doing?" Wrecker growled, but Hunter had a pretty good idea as the blue priest turned to greet and embrace him. "Ah, likewise! It is good to see you are well, Quo! I am honestly surprised you beat us here! I had already created time allowances within the plan in order to wait specifically for you," said the blue-skinned priest. "Time allowances you would not have had, as I hope this scene reveals to you," Quo said somberly, Velen nodding and looking around. "Indeed, and now that you mention it, what happened here, Quo? I can scarcely believe you did all of this," Current 82 Velen asked. "Hardly. It's best not to dwell on it any more than to know that we have to leave immediately. I suspect a member of the Inquisitorial Triumvirate is here right now, and she brought things which are potentially even more dangerous. To say nothing of the shenanigans I have been a part of. Speaking of which," said the false tech priest, turning towards the craft where Clone Force 99 was hiding. "Oh, he can't be serious." Crosshair groaned as Wrecker laughed. "It looks like he is. Alright, let's go meet his friends. With any luck, we'll leave with more than we plan to come for," said Hunter. "And if we don't have any luck?" the sniper asked dourly as he stood and approached. "Then let's hope the general is having better luck than we are." There was a squeal as the heavy doors slid open, light from within the room flickering and buzzing to life asymmetrically, revealing what amounted to being a massive, specialized study which bordered on the definition of a personal laboratory. One corner of the large room was dedicated to tall, towering shelves of books and scrolls. Many oddly harnessed to the shelves they sat in by way of locked cages installed directly into the furniture, or by being wrapped in layers of chains, which were themselves anchored to prevent the book being easily withdrawn. Between the walls of strangely restrained literature was a desk, a comfortable armchair with a heating lamp hanging above it, and several shelves and tools, both for reading and for other things. Directly across from this, in the opposite corner, was a setup which stretched all the way up that side of the room, taking up more space than anything else present. The soft, luxurious red carpeting which covered the floor ended abruptly in this place, revealing bare white tiles. Upon them sat several desks and specialized observation cases and stations, where thick, transparent blocks of metal held artifacts and even some books and other mundane objects, presumably for cautious studying. Built into the wall on that side were various safes and lockboxes that slid out to be accessed, each containing even more forbidden and corrupting artifacts. In the center of the room was a row of mechanized armors, most extremely similar to the kind Anakin had already seen being put to use by the space marine he had battled. But these seemed fundamentally different. Of the 4 suits of armor present, 3 were colored black and finished in gold, and no one suit of armor was quite the same as the others. They looked somewhat ramshackle, as though different pieces from different suits of armor had been grafted artfully together to create the suits he now saw. Additionally, they bore different symbols from the Imperial armor, most of them equally disturbing. From literal hanging skulls, screaming faces forged impeccably into the ceramite skin, or the prevalent 8-pointed stars which hung or were displayed in various places on the suits. There were also symbols which seemed to hurt weirdly to stare at, so Anakin didn't, walking past the suits and towards the study, eyeing the finely carved shelves, the intricate designs on the cover of each of the books, especially the caged or chained ones. R2-D2 followed close on his heels, whistling nervously to his human friend. Anakin ignored the droid's concern, continuing to trace his intact hand across the complex art that had been worked densely into nearly every surface before him. "Is literally everything in your Imperium so elaborate?" Anakin asked as he fingered the lock which held shut the cage to one particular book. The cover of the book looked like it was made from roughly stitched and barely prepared leather, and though it bore no title along its spine, a tag at the base of its compartment identified it in high Imperial script as Necronomicon Volume 9.
Do not touch any of that, and do not call it my Imperium,
said Chaon, the first words he had spoken since they had entered the lift a few minutes ago. Anakin knew the man was blind, but he really wouldn't know that just from watching him move. Chaon had been unnaturally coordinated before, But now he walked in a manner that seemed the essence of casual, moving his head from right to left as though scanning the room as naturally as Anakin might have. He moved towards the tiled half of the room right away, walking between the thick glass encasements, seeking something specific. "What are you looking for, Chaon?" Anakin asked, pulling away from the bookshelf he had been inspecting and striding over towards the unarmed space marine, looking around a bit more as he did. The back of the room had a small living space, with a bed that folded out of the wall, some wardrobes, and a faucet and basin, though one only large enough to wash one's face and hands with. The bed was currently folded down and untended, which was how the Jedi knew what it was. And to the right of it was an enormous glass display case built into the wall, and behind that, another suit of armor, though this one looked very different, if somewhat similar, than the trophies which stood near the center of the room.
"I am seeking my weapons,"
Chaon said distractedly, muscles squinting around eyes which were sewn shut, a reflex he expressed as he used his psychic sight to search. Anakin walked into the same area that Chaon was searching through, looking into the nearest glass case, which contained a row of red stones, each set upon a velvet cushion, and each pulsing with light from within. He raised an eyebrow at that, walking closer and placing his hand on the case, reaching down with the deft touch of a Jedi's mind and brushing his awareness over the stones. Said a voice from the stones. The voice sounded like someone yelling, but from so far away that Anakin could barely hear it. The language too was beautiful, but completely alien. He leaned down more and focused a little harder. Sintur Urad Aman Shunmin Farosin Bauron Ainir Sinor Bauron Ainir Singeli Min Feridir Turazin Rad Aifirin Rakbui ISO Tarhoiler. The voice suddenly screamed, and Anakin reeled back, a gasp bursting from him, sweat coating his skin anew, feeling as though he had just barely avoided the invisible teeth of some terrible trap. What does it look like?" Anakin asked, shaking his head and moving on to the next case. This one contained a sword, a long, languid thing with a serpentine bend waving across the entire blade, like flame frozen in cruel steel. All along the spine of the weapon were brass runes which seemed to glow as if backlit by roaring fires the longer Anakin stared at them. The pommel was a demonic face, grinning obscenely. Just its expression was enough to render a bitter distaste within Anakin, as if whatever it was meant to be bearing witness to was so unspeakable, and its glee so misplaced, that it almost shone off it and onto Anakin like some allegory of displaced light. "Never mind. I think I found it," Anakin called. Chaon turned and walked over, eyeing the demonic sword with his empty, skin-sheathed pits.
"That is not my weapon, Anakin Skywalker. We will not be able to fight our way to where we need to go with a pathetic tool such as this,"
scoffed the Marine. Anakin blanched outright, turning to face Chaon with a wide-eyed expression, face stretched. "Chaon, can you feel this thing? I know you may be out of practice after being locked up with those rods stuck in you, but this sword feels alive. And not just alive, it feels force sensitive, as though they forged that thing out of an entire Sith Lord. I'd know. I lost my arm to one," Anakin said, voice strained with incredulity.
"I do not know what a Sith is, But I guarantee you that whatever it is, if it is only as powerful as a single daemon, like the one bound within that sword, then this Sith would also be insufficient to help us fight our way to our escape route. No, my weapons are worth much more than nearly any single member of the Neverborn.
The Chaos Sorcerer explained to the petulant Jedi. Anakin's face scrunched. Daemon? Neverborn? Everchosen? You use a lot of words I don't understand either, Chaon. How the hell can anyone be locked into a sword? Anakin asked.
Precisely,
said Chaon. Anakin blinked, face going blank. What? He asked.
Never mind. I will explain it all to you later. For now, all I can say is that daemons are not physical biological entities the way you and I would know them. They are beings, life forms in many ways, which are composed entirely of the warp. They exist within it at a fundamental level, and take great pains to cross into the physical world to pursue their goals. Their very natures make them extremely powerful, able to use their wills and mind-soul semblances to warp and alter the very fabric of reality in an uncountable amount of ways. The result, however, is often very similar. Total chaos and complete destruction follow them wherever they are allowed to run entirely rampant. Thus, to utilize them, men such as myself take measures to restrain and control them or their power. The weapon you are looking at was likely crafted by a warpsmith after either defeating or creating a contract with the daemon that is currently locked inside,
said the sorcerer as he turned away to keep looking. Anakin followed soon after. So, what? Are we looking for your own big demon sword? The Jedi asked, receiving a laugh from Chaon in response.
Nothing so crude nor crass. Do not mistake me. There is some brutal merit to the art of forging daemons into blades, but that should only be done with the absolute strongest of their kind, those who could not be otherwise controlled. Doing differently renders most of a daemon's power inert, converting it into some ability which can only be expressed through the often predatory and imperfect union forged between sword and wielder. In a word, taking something as vibrant as a neverborn spirit and forging it into a sword is uncreative. My method preserves the entirety of the daemon's power and form, though admittedly at great risk to myself. As you will soon learn, Anakin Skywalker, true masters do not play their games on twirling blades. At least, not twirling blades alone. One does so with names, knowledge, and most of all, deception,
said Chaon. Deception? Anakin asked as they walked past a few more cases.
Yes, deception. For every truth a daemon tells, it speaks 1,000 lies. Why? Because the only power greater than truth is lies. That is a lesson the Emperor knew, and it is a lesson all daemons know even more intimately. For they all know that if you can lie well enough to deceive the universe, you can convince reality to believe your deception. And then, who is lying really? You? Or the universe around you?
The sorcerer mused. Anakin scowled. Chaon, your riddles are making my head hurt. Just tell me what I'm looking for already so I can... The Chosen One began to say, before his eyes caught something, the sight of it stealing his words with beguiling distraction. Inside a large, rectangular case was a set of objects and implements holding them. Coming closer, he saw that the case had a set of small, frail-seeming articulated arms inside, mounted onto the floor of the case, each thin, multi-jointed arm ending in a small pair of delicate pincers. Two of the arms were folded down against the floor of the case, clearly in disuse, while two were holding an object up for inspection. A fifth mounting hung outside of the case as well, though this one did not end in little pincers, but rather the round, thick glassed head of a magnifying glass. This glass had been positioned over the presented object that the two interior arms were holding up. Coming right up to it, Anakin saw that it was a card of some kind, though not like a playing card. The deck the card belonged to was within the case as well, the rectangular leather pouch still open, revealing that it was stuffed full of other cards in addition to the one which had evidently been withdrawn for study. The presented card was painted on a flat stone canvas of gray and black, which had been finely carved as well as artistically inked. But what truly grabbed Anakin's attention was the picture depicted within it. The galaxy seemed to burn around it, like a prevailing cloak of hellfire, and the Jedi was forced to wonder how the artist had managed to render such an exquisite image on so small a space. A figure stood in the foreground, distinct despite the flames, its masculine body wreathed in ancient armor. Gouts of what Anakin at first thought were white waters escaping from the skull-like helmet and dark cloak the figure wore. But it was not water, but rather a thick, mist-like penumbra composed of the ghostly mass of a billion screaming souls which exuded out from the central figure like a dense aura. In its right gauntlet, it held a world which looked like Coruscant, the silver sphere blackening and crumbling. Blood dripped from that hand, but it was not the blood of the planet, yet something, somehow, far worse. Again, he could not explain it, but he felt as though that crimson rain falling from the figure's clenching fist was bloodshed born of deepest betrayal, the blood of a beloved one, spilled in spite of all loyalty and compassion. In its other hand was held a brilliant, thorned chain of glowing metal, and at its feet struggled a twin-headed eagle wrapped in the chains. It was bleeding from the many spurs and spikes which penetrated its flesh, the beautiful beast trying to struggle free, and somehow, most terribly of all, was something that was not loudly depicted by the art, but silently recognized by Anakin. That figure in the center, in the ancient armor, dressed all in black with its helmed head entirely covered by its skull-like obsidian mask, was somehow very familiar to the Jedi. Despite the obvious menace of the character as portrayed on the card, actually seeing it set off an agonized pang within Anakin, like the silhouette of a father he had never known. The intimate nature of the familiarity he felt struck him such that he was frozen in thought until Chaon spoke from beside him.
"Ah, you have found them,"
said the Sorcerer Lord. What? Anakin asked, startled by the sudden appearance and twisting to look at the Marine who had arrived over his shoulder.
"My weapons. It seems you found them without my help after all,"
Chaon added as he looked with his eyeless eyes at the case of transparent steel.
"Are there controls to move those arms?"
Chaon asked, and the Jedi took a moment to look around before nodding. "Yeah, right here," he said, reaching for the manual cranks which controlled the thin brass arms.
"Good. We should stow that card before opening this case. Doing otherwise could be unfortunate. for all of us.
The Chaos Space Marine advised, Anakin nodding his head again and moving them to begin doing just that. Working the wheeled cranks and levers with only one functional hand proved trickier than Anakin had realized, leaving him some time as he figured his way through it. So, Chaon, what exactly do these cards do? How can cards be deadlier than demon swords? Anakin asked as he worked.
Alone, they are not. It is what is within the card that is the weapon, not the card itself. Each one in the deck contains a daemon that I chose to capture for my use throughout my long time serving within the warp. I chose no chaff to join my armory, selecting only those daemons which I found impressive enough to bind, and taking great pains to learn the name of each one.
Said Chaon. Why is knowing their names important? The Jedi added as he tried to carefully slide the stone card back into the deck using the squeaking little arms in the case.
It is all important, in fact. Daemons and other creatures of the warp can be largely controlled and dominated, if not weakened or impaired, by any who are knowledgeable enough and powerful enough to speak their true name. Without it, the already Herculean task of dominating a daemon would be all but impossible.
The warp sorcerer informed the struggling Jedi. R2-D2 suddenly beeped loudly, and Anakin waved his hand at the droid. No, I can do it, the Jedi General said dismissively. So, we're going to use the demons you have stuffed in these cards to fight our way up and out of the lift, right? Anakin asked, but Chaon shook his head.
No. Good as my daemons are, they would be ill-matched against the surviving Sisters of Silence, and any blanks who manage to live through your tearing of their anti-psyker veil. It would not be impossible to fight our way through them, but it would be a gamble, and one I am not eager to take. Win or lose, the cost would be astronomical, and I'd like to keep some of my daemons, even after we escape.
Then where the hell are we going? I thought you said that the lift was the only way out of— hey! Ow! R2! Stop that! Ow! Anakin began to ask before he was suddenly zapped in the leg by the diminutive droid who used the electric prongs he deployed from his chassis to drive Anakin away from the controls. Once done, R2-D2 periscoped his viewing lens up so that he could clearly see what he was working with, while clamps and manipulators extended out from his open chassis cavity, each taking a lever or turn wheel and rapidly completing the task Anakin had been struggling to perform. In seconds, the card was slid back into its deck. The leather flap which covered it closed and wound shut, before R2 extended his interface tool into the corresponding input slot on the case, causing it to hiss and squeal open a few moments later.
Ah, excellent. With this, we now have something we can truly use to fight back without having to skulk and sneak for an advantage. However, I fear I will not be the one between us to control the daemons once they are summoned. That task will fall to you,
said the sly sorcerer. Me? Why by the many moons should I do it? The Jedi asked, more than a little shocked by the suggestion.
Daemons obey strength, and I am anything but strong now. Even with the bars powering me, they will sense that I am at the limit of my ability, and they will fight me harder for it. I will help you and join my will to yours, but you will be the center of the thrust, the core of the command,
said Iskandar Chaon, hiding his true reasons from the Jedi, suppressing a grin as Anakin slowly nodded. This man named Skywalker ignorantly made claims of destiny he did not even understand, and did so with a power that was not only unfathomably large, but fundamentally differently natured from the power Chaon was used to expressing. But that did not mean that this Jedi General was any kind of ever chosen, if anyone ever would be. In fact, Chaon secretly resented the idea, for that ancient mantle should have belonged to the Black Legion's founder and his own lord and brother, Abaddon the Despoiler. It would take more than a couple of incredible feats to convince the old sorcerer, and to him, this was the next most natural step. Observing the Jedi's reaction and exposure to demonic entities would take Chaon at least one step closer to the truth of things. This time, however, he would protect Anakin from the folly of his inexperience. After all, he still very much needed the Jedi to effect his escape, even if Chaon himself was the one between them who would take the primary role in their daemon craft. Fine, let's just be quick about this. I've more than had my fill of new experiences today, Anakin said in obvious frustration.
Do not concern yourself overmuch. I will be here to help support your attempt. Nothing in Daemonry is safe, but I shall endeavor to guard you with the might I have as you perform the task.
Iskander Chaon reassured. Anakin nodded his head and crossed his arms to the best of his ability. Just tell me what to do, Chaon, he said in a clipped, agitated tone. The Chaos Space Marine nodded.
Very well. Go to the deck. We will begin by selecting a card,
he instructed. Anakin reached out with his good hand, unwinding the leather pouch with dexterous fingers and flipping it open, looking down at the top of the stone cards. R2-D2 whistled in a low, wary way, backing away and behind Anakin. I know, buddy. I don't like it either, but we don't have much of a choice right now, the Jedi said back as he reached down towards the deck.
Indeed, none of us do. Now, we will begin with a card calling. Do not touch them directly,
said the sorcerer, pausing Anakin's hand an inch above the black cards.
Instead, make a palm over the deck, and then call the name of the card you wish to summon.
The traitor Astartes continued to instruct. Anakin did as he was told, making a flat palm over the deck, feeling its power, awed and twisting, radiating out from the object. Which card should I call first? Anakin asked. Chaon considered for a moment before grinning from behind the distracted Jedi. There was no reason to start small, so the Black Legionnaire chose the strongest daemon he felt he could easily control if Anakin failed to.
I think I know just the beast to begin with. The daemon within this card is an old thing I have been piecing back together after it was slain. I suspect it met its end during our first uprising against the Imperium, perhaps even personally destroyed by the Emperor himself. It has grown into an incredibly powerful entity, but that power is largely held together by tethers I have created while recovering its shards. Broken thing that it is, it has no name that remains, so it should prove simple to command. Call forth within your mind the card known as the Lost Child,
the sorcerer explained. Anakin nodded, closing his eyes as he did as instructed. The deck resonated invisibly with him, and for a moment, the Jedi felt a true appreciation for the intricacy of the unseen workings that had gone into the creation of the cards. This sorcery was far more advanced than anything the Chosen One had encountered in the Jedi temples, striking him almost as a form of Force technology in and of itself. With only a little more coaxing, the vibrating deck suddenly stilled, and the desired card slid up and out. The top of the thin stone depiction adhering to the bottom of the Jedi's palm. And Anakin, in spite of the situation, smiled at the effect. Now came the hard part.
Now I've never been a one to play it safe. I might play a little dirty someday, and I'm following fate. They say I'm the chosen one. I know what it takes to be a king, and be the song everybody wanna sing, and break harmony, and be the chosen one. Ain't nothing gonna stop this. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. I was born to be making history, something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. It's plain reality. I was born to be something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. This fire, this fire. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire, this fire. They told me I was never getting far, but those words couldn't take to heart. I knew the day would come, be the chosen one, yeah. I never had a safe place to hide, run to the end of the tunnel to find a train on a shining sun, to be the chosen one. Ain't nothing gonna stop this. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. I was born to be making history, something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. It's plain reality. I was born to be something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. This fire, ain't nothing gonna stop this fire, this fire. I was born to be making history, something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. It's plain reality. I was born to be something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. I was born to be making history, something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. It's plain reality. Burn, burn. I was born to be something greater, something higher. Ain't nothing gonna stop this fire. Stop this fire.
Watch this, there's a legend in the making, so fine like diamonds and gold. In style, can't stop misbehaving. Whoa, whoa. Just